The last human stronghold fell under the weight of the alien onslaught. The sky burned with the glow of their warships, their shadows swallowing the remnants of cities that once thrived with life. The air was thick with ash and the acrid stench of destruction. Amid the ruins, a lone figure stumbled to the wreckage, their breath ragged, their body battered. This was the end. They knew it. Humanity had fought valiantly, but the aliens were too advanced, too relentless. The figure, a soldier named Kale, clutched a broken rifle in their hands, its barrel bent and useless. They had seen too much. Cities reduced to rubble, loved ones torn apart, the cries of dying echoing in their ears. Now they were the last, the final flicker of a species that had once dreamed of the stars. Kale's boots crunched over shattered glass as they moved through the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling marketplace. The aliens had come without warning, their ships descending like a plague. They were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Tall, insectoid creatures with exoskeletons that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their weapons were energy-based, slicing through steel and flesh with ease. They showed no mercy, no desire for negotiation. Their goal was clear: extermination. Earth was a resource to be stripped, its inhabitants an inconvenience to be erased. Kale had fought them for years, watching as humanity's defenses crumbled one by one. Now there was nothing left. No armies, no governments, no hope. Just Kale, alone, waiting for the end. As Kale moved through the ruins, they stumbled upon a familiar sight, a bunker hidden beneath the rubble. It was one of the last remaining shelters, a place where survivors had tried to hold out. Kale pushed aside the debris and descended into the darkness. The air was stale, the walls lined with the remnants of a life that no longer existed. Supplies were scattered across the floor, long since depleted. Kale's heart ached as they remembered the faces of those who had once sought refuge here. Friends, comrades, strangers, all gone now. Kale sank to their knees, their body trembling with exhaustion and grief. They had fought for so long, but it had all been for nothing. The aliens had won. Humanity was extinct. As Kale sat in the darkness, a faint sound reached their ears, a low hum, barely audible but growing louder. It was coming from deep within the bunker, from a section that had been sealed off long ago. Kale's curiosity piqued. They forced themselves to their feet and followed the sound. The hum grew stronger, vibrating through the walls and floor. Kale's heart raced as they approached a massive metal door, its surface covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. The door was ancient, far older than anything Kale had ever seen. It was covered in layers of dust and rust, but the symbols pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. Kale hesitated, their hand hovering over the door. Whatever lay beyond, it was not at this time. But what did it matter now? There was nothing left to lose. With a deep breath, Kale pushed the door open. The hum grew deafening, a deep, resonant vibration that shook the very ground beneath their feet. The room beyond was vast, filled with tower machines that glowed in eerie blue light. At the center of the room stood a row of massive pods, each one encased in a crystalline shell. Inside the pod were figures, humanoid, but unlike anything Kale had ever seen. They were tall and muscular, their bodies covered in sleek, biomechanical armor that seemed to pulse with life. Their faces were obscured by helmets, but Kale could feel their presence, a powerful, almost overwhelming energy that filled the room. These were not human, but they were not alien either. They were something else entirely. Kale approached the nearest pod, their heart pounding in their chest. As they drew closer, the pod's crystalline shell began to crack, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The figure inside stirred, its glowing eyes snapping open. Kale stumbled back, their breath catching in their throat. The figure stepped out of the pod, its movements fluid and precise. It towered over Kale, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The figure turned its gaze to Kale, its eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce through their very soul. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the figure spoke, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. "We are the Guardians," it said. "We have slept for millennia, waiting for the day when Earth would call upon us once more. The time has come. Humanity's darkest hour is upon us, and we will not fail." Kale's mind raced, struggling to comprehend what was happening. These beings, these guardians, were ancient, created by a humanity long forgotten. They were the last hope, the final line of defense against the alien invaders. As Kale stood there, the other pods began to crack open, one by one. The Guardians emerged, their movements synchronized, their purpose clear. They were warriors, built for one purpose, to protect Earth and its inhabitants. And now they were awake. The ground shook as the Guardians activated their systems. Their armor glowed with a fierce, otherworldly light. Kale felt a surge of hope, a feeling they had thought long dead. These beings were powerful, more powerful than anything the aliens had ever faced. But they were also ancient, their technology and tactics untested against a modern threat. Kale knew that the battle ahead would be brutal, but for the first time in years, they felt a glimmer of hope. The Guardians were here, and they would not fall. As the Guardians prepared for war, Kale stood among them, a lone human in a sea of ancient warriors. They knew that the fight ahead would be the hardest of their life, but they were ready. The aliens had taken everything from them, but they would not take Earth, not while the Guardians still stood. The hum grew louder, filling the chamber with a deafening roar. The Guardians moved as one, their eyes fixed on the surface above. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and Kale would be there to see it through. For humanity, for the future, for Earth. The Guardians move with precision, their biomechanical forms radiating an aura of power that filled the chamber. Kale stood among them, dwarfed by their towering presence, yet feeling a strange sense of belonging. These ancient warriors, forged by a humanity long lost, were now Earth's last hope. The League Guardian, its armor etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with light, turned to Kale. Its voice was deep, resonant, and carried the weight of centuries. "You are the last," it said. "Your knowledge of the enemy is vital. Guide us, and we will reclaim what has been taken." Kale nodded, their mind racing. The aliens had overrun the planet, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever conceived. But the Guardians were different. Their design was alien yet familiar, a blend of organic and mechanical elements that seemed almost alive. Kale could feel the hum of their systems, a low, steady vibration that resonated through the air. The Guardians were not just machines. They were something more. They were sentient, their eyes glowing with intelligence and purpose. Kale realized that these beings were not just weapons. They were protectors, created to safeguard Earth and its inhabitants. And now they were awake. The League Guardian, whom Kale began to think of as Aegis, gestured toward a console embedded in the wall. The symbols on its surface glowed as Aegis activated it, revealing a holographic map of Earth. The planet was covered in red markers, each one representing an alien stronghold. Kale's heart sank as they realized the extent of the invasion. The aliens had spread across the globe, their forces concentrated in key locations. But Aegis did not falter. "We will strike here," it said, pointing to a location near the ruins of what was once a major city. "Their presence is strong, but their defenses are predictable. We will dismantle them piece by piece." Kale hesitated. The aliens were not just numerous. They were adaptable. Their technology evolved rapidly, and their tactics were ruthless. But the Guardians were unlike anything the aliens had faced. Aegis explained their origins, their voices echoing through the chamber. Long ago, during a golden age of human civilization, the threat of an unknown enemy loomed. Fearing the worst, humanity created the Guardians, warriors designed to protect Earth in its darkest hour. But the enemy never came, and the Guardians were buried, their existence forgotten. Until now, as the Guardians prepared for their first strike, Kale felt a surge of determination. These beings were humanity's legacy, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of a species that had once reached for the stars. Aegis turned to Kale, its glowing eyes piercing. "You will accompany us," it said. "Your knowledge of the enemy is invaluable. Together we will reclaim Earth." Kale nodded, their grip tightening on the broken rifle they still carried. It was a relic of a lost war, but it was all they had. The Guardians, however, needed no weapons. Their bodies were weapons, their armor capable of withstanding the aliens' energy-based attacks. They moved with fluid grace, their forms shifting and adapting as they prepared for battle. The journey to the surface was swift. The Guardians moved as one, their movements synchronized, their purpose clear. Kale struggled to keep up, their human body no match for the speed and agility of the biomechanical warriors. But the Guardians did not leave them behind. Aegis stayed by Kale's side, its presence both reassuring and intimidating. As they emerged from the bunker, the devastation was overwhelming. The sky was choked with smoke, the ground littered with the wreckage of human and alien technology. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay. Kale's heart ached as they remembered the world that had once been, but there was no time for grief. The aliens were nearby, their presence a constant threat. The Guardians moved silently, their forms blending into shadows. Kale followed, their senses heightened by the tension in the air. The aliens were close. Kale could feel it. The Guardian sensors detected movement ahead, and Aegis signaled for silence. The aliens were patrolling the area, their insectoid forms moving with a predatory grace. Kale's breath caught in their throat as they counted the enemy, dozens of them, heavily armed and alert. But the Guardians did not hesitate. Aegis gave the signal, and they struck. The battle was swift and brutal. The Guardians moved with a precision that was almost inhuman. Their attacks calculated and efficient. Their armor absorbed the aliens' energy blasts, their own weapons cutting through the enemy with ease. Kale watched in awe as the Guardians dismantled the alien patrol, their movements a blur of light and motion. The aliens fought back, their weapons firing in a desperate attempt to repel the attack. But it was no use. The Guardians were unstoppable. Kale joined the fight, their broken rifle firing uselessly against the aliens' armor. But the Guardians did not need their help. They were a force of nature, their power unmatched. As the last alien fell, the Guardians stood amidst the wreckage, their forms glowing in otherworldly light. Kale approached Aegis, their heart pounding with a mixture of awe and fear. "That was incredible," they said, their voice trembling. Aegis turned to them, its glowing eyes piercing. "This is only the beginning," it said. "The aliens are numerous, but they are not invincible. We will reclaim Earth one battle at a time." Kale nodded, their determination renewed. The Guardians were powerful, but the war was far from over. The aliens would not give up easily, and their next move would be even more devastating. But for the first time in years, Kale felt a glimmer of hope. The Guardians were here, and they would not fall. As the Guardians prepared for their next move, Kale stood among them, a lone human in a sea of ancient warriors. They knew that the fight ahead would be the hardest of their life, but they were ready. The aliens had taken everything from them, but they would not take Earth. Not while the Guardians still stood. The hum of the Guardian systems filled the air, a steady, reassuring sound that echoed through the ruins. The battle for Earth was far from over. But for the first time, Kale believed they could win. For humanity, for the future, for Earth. The Guardians' first victory was a spark in the darkness, but the war was far from over. The aliens, though caught off guard by the sudden emergence of these ancient warriors, were quick to adapt, their forces regrouped, their tactics shifting as they sought to counter the new threat. Kale stood with the Guardians, their presence a constant reminder of the stakes. The aliens had taken everything, cities, lives, hope, but the Guardians were a force unlike anything the invaders had ever faced. Yet, Kale knew the aliens would not retreat without a fight. They were relentless, their numbers vast, and their technology ever-evolving. The battle ahead would be brutal, but the Guardians were ready. The aliens' counterattack came swiftly. Their warships descended from the skies, their weapons raining destruction on the Guardians' position. The ground shook as energy blasts tore through the ruins, sending debris flying in all directions. The Guardians moved with precision, their armor absorbing the blast as they returned fire. Kale watched in awe as Aegis led the charge, its form a blur of light and motion. The aliens' new weapon, a massive energy cannon mounted on one of their ships, targeted the Guardians, its beams slicing through the air with terrifying power. Aegis raised its arm, a shield of energy forming to block the blast. The impact was deafening, the force of it sending shock waves through the ground. But Aegis held firm, its system straining under the pressure. Kale knew they had to act. The aliens' weapon was too powerful. If it wasn't destroyed, the Guardians would be overwhelmed. They grabbed a fallen alien rifle, its design unfamiliar but functional, and sprinted toward the cannon. The aliens were focused on the Guardians, their attention diverted by the relentless assault. Kale moved through the chaos, their heart pounding as they dodged energy blasts and debris. The cannon loomed ahead, its surface glowing with a malevolent light. Kale took aim, firing at the weapon's power source. The shot struck true, but the cannon's armor was too thick. It wasn't enough. Kale cursed, their mind racing. They needed something stronger. Aegis's voice echoed in their mind, a strange, telepathic connection forming between them. "Use this," it said, its voice calm despite the chaos. Kale felt a surge of energy as a small device materialized in their hand. It was a plasma charge, its surface pulsing with a faint blue light. Kale didn't question it. They activated the charge and hurled it at the cannon. The explosion was blinding, the force of it knocking Kale off their feet. The cannon's structure buckled, its energy beam faltering before it collapsed in a heap of molten metal. The aliens' assault wavered, their forces thrown into disarray. The Guardians seized the opportunity, their attacks growing more ferocious as they pushed the aliens back. The battle raged on, the Guardians' power unmatched, but their numbers limited. The aliens, though shaken, were far from defeated. Their warships retreated. But Kale knew it was only a matter of time before they returned with even greater force. The Guardians regrouped, their forms glowing faintly as they assessed the damage. Aegis approached Kale, its presence both reassuring and imposing. "You fought well," it said, its voice carrying a note of approval. Kale nodded, their body aching from the exertion. "We can't keep this up forever," they said, their voice tinged with worry. "They'll keep coming, and we're outnumbered." Aegis's gaze was steady, its glowing eyes piercing through the gloom. "We are not alone," it said. "There are others like us, buried beneath the earth. We must awaken them." Kale's eyes widened. More Guardians? The thought was both exhilarating and daunting. If there were others, perhaps they stood a chance. But awakening them would not be easy. The aliens would not sit idly by while the Guardians grew stronger. Aegis seemed to sense Kale's thoughts. "The process is dangerous," it admitted. "The aliens would detect the energy signature. We must protect the awakening site at all costs." Kale's resolve hardened. They had come this far. They would not falter now. The Guardians moved swiftly, their forms cutting through the ruins as they made their way to the next bunker. The journey was fraught with danger, the aliens' patrols growing more frequent as they sought to locate the source of the disturbance. Kale stayed close to Aegis, their senses on high alert. The bunker was deep within enemy territory, its entrance hidden beneath layers of rubble and debris. The Guardians cleared the way, their strength and precision unmatched. But as they approached the entrance, the aliens struck. A swarm of insectoid warriors descended upon them, their weapons firing in a relentless barrage. The Guardians formed a protective circle around Kale, their shields deflecting the blasts as they returned fire. Kale felt a surge of adrenaline as they joined the fight, their alien rifle firing in short, controlled bursts. The battle was intense, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal. The aliens' numbers were overwhelming, but the Guardians held their ground. Aegis moved with fluid grace, its attacks calculated and precise. Kale watched as it tore through the enemy, its form a blur of light and motion. But even the Guardians had their limits. As the last alien fell, the Guardians turned their attention to the bunker. The entrance was sealed, its surface covered in the same ancient symbols that had adorned the first bunker. Aegis activated the console, the symbols glowing as the door began to open. The hum of energy filled the air, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to shake the very ground. Kale felt a surge of hope as the door slid open, revealing another chamber filled with pods. But their relief was short-lived. The aliens had detected the energy signature, their warships descending from the skies once more. The Guardians moved quickly, their forms glowing as they prepared for the next battle. Kale stood among them, their heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The aliens would not take this from them, not while the Guardians still stood. The battle for Earth was far from over, but Kale knew they were not alone. The Guardians were here, and they would fight to the last. for humanity, for the future, for Earth. The final battle began with a deafening roar as the alien warships descended, their weapons lighting up the sky with a barrage of energy blasts. The Guardians stood firm, their forms glowing with an otherworldly light as they prepared to defend the awakening site. Kale stood among them, their heart pounding as they gripped the alien rifle tightly. The air was thick with tension, the ground trembling under the weight of the approaching enemy. This was it, the moment that would determine the fate of Earth. The aliens had thrown everything they had into this assault, their forces converging on the bunker with a single goal: to destroy the Guardians before they could awaken their brethren. The Guardians moved with precision, their attacks calculated and relentless. Aegis led the charge, its form a blur of light and motion as it tore through the alien ranks. The aliens fought back with everything they had, their energy weapons slicing through the air with terrifying power. But the Guardians were unstoppable, their armor absorbing the blasts as they returned fire with devastating accuracy. Kale joined the fight, their alien rifle firing in short, controlled bursts. They knew they were outmatched, but they refused to back down. This was their home, their world, and they would not let the aliens take it without a fight. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sound of explosions and the cries of the dying. The aliens' numbers were overwhelming, but the Guardians held their ground, their movements synchronized as they fought to protect the bunker. Kale watched as Aegis took down a massive alien war machine, its form collapsing in a heap of molten metal. But the victory was short-lived. More aliens poured in, their forces seemingly endless. Kale's heart sank as they realized the scale of the assault. The Guardians were powerful, but even they had their limits. As the battle raged on, the bunker's energy signature grew stronger, the hum of the awakening process resonating through the air. The aliens redoubled their efforts, their attacks growing more desperate as they sought to breach the Guardians' defenses. Kale felt a surge of determination as they fought alongside the ancient warriors. They would not let the aliens win. Not now, not when they were so close. The Guardians' forms glowed brighter, their system straining under the pressure. Aegis turned to Kale, its voice calm despite the chaos. "The awakening is nearly complete," it said, "but we must hold the line a little longer." Kale nodded, their grip tightening on the rifle. They knew what had to be done. The aliens were closing in, their forces converging on the bunker with a single-minded determination. Kale took a deep breath, their mind focused on the task at hand. They would not let the aliens reach the bunker, not while they still drew breath. The Guardians fought with everything they had, their attacks growing more ferocious as they pushed the aliens back. But the enemy was relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. As the final moments of the awakening process approached, the aliens launched a desperate assault, their forces breaking through the Guardians' defenses. Kale watched in horror as a group of aliens reached the bunker, their weapons trained on the entrance. Without thinking, Kale sprinted toward them, their rifle firing in a desperate attempt to stop them. But it wasn't enough. The aliens were too many, their weapons too powerful. Kale felt a surge of despair as they realized they were too late. But then, something incredible happened. The bunker's door burst open, a wave of energy erupting from within as the newly awakened Guardians emerged. Their forms glowed with a fierce, otherworldly light, their presence filling the air with a sense of power and purpose. The aliens hesitated, their advance faltering as the new Guardians joined the fight. The tide of the battle shifted in an instant, the aliens' forces thrown into disarray as the Guardians unleashed their full power. Kale watched in awe as the ancient warriors tore through the enemy, their attacks calculated and precise. The aliens fought back, but it was no use. The Guardians were unstoppable. As the last alien fell, the battlefield fell silent, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal. The Guardians stood amidst the wreckage, their forms glowing faintly as they assessed the damage. Kale approached Aegis, their heart pounding with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," they said, their voice trembling. Aegis turned to them, its glowing eyes piercing through the gloom. "The battle is won," it said, "but the war is far from over. The aliens will return, and we must be ready." Kale nodded, their determination renewed. The Guardians were powerful, but the fight for Earth was far from finished. The aliens had been pushed back, but they were not defeated. Kale knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were ready. The Guardians were here, and they would not falter. Together, they would reclaim Earth one battle at a time, for humanity, for the future, for Earth. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting its light on the battlefield, Kale felt a surge of hope. The Guardians stood tall, their forms glowing with an otherworldly light. They were Earth's protectors, its last line of defense, and they would not fall. The battle for Earth was far from over, but for the first time, Kale believed they could win. The Guardians were here, and they would fight to the last. For humanity, for the future, for Earth.